Hello, Miami Dade students. My name is Naffarterrier, and today I'm going to be talking about the book The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. Ursula K. Le Guin is a female writer who lived from 1929 to 2018. She is the author of 3 novels, as well as short stories, poetry, children's books, essays, and even works of translation. She has received the National Book Award as well as many other awards and was even named the Living Legend by the Library of Congress, according to UrsulaKLagoon.org. The Lathe of Heaven is a book that follows George Orr, a man who can change reality through his dreams. So George hates his powers, he absolutely despises him, and he tries everything in his power to stop his dreams from coming true. This unfortunately leads him to a psychiatrist called Dr. Haber, who finds out about his powers and begins to abuse them. So George, unhappy with the way that Dr. Haber is conducting his sessions and are abusing his powers, decides to go to a lawyer called Heather. She tries to help him, but Dr. Haber continues to abuse his dreams, changing reality further and further until multiple tragedies happen. After the tragedies happen, Orr decides that he can no longer let Dr. Haber use his power and goes on a journey to stop Haber along with Heather. In this speech, I'm going to be talking about how the novel explores change through our main character, George Orr. I'm going to be talking about the change in his relationship with his powers, the change in how he reviews his life, and also the romantic changes that he goes through. The first point that I want to talk about and explore is the progression of change that George Orr goes through and through his relationship within his powers. George is a simple man. He's very average in every way. He has a decent job. He's single and is also average looking. He has a quiet, more timid personality and refuses to draw attention to himself in any way. So because that he has extraordinary powers, you would think this would be a good thing since he's so average in everyday life, but this is not what George wants. He just wants to be completely as normal as possible, leading him to despise his powers. In the beginning of chapter 2, when George is sent to foresee the psychiatrist, Dr. Haber, and Dr. Haber finds out about what his dreams can do, he states, "I don't want to change things," or said as if stating the super obvious. Who am I to meddle with the way things go? In this scene, we really see how much George despises and hates his powers. He does not view changing reality as a good thing in any way. He doesn't want to have anything to do with his powers because he believes that nobody like himself, such an average person, should be able to have such tremendous power over the world. Later in the novel, we see that Orr has viewed himself differently than when he first was introduced in the book. He has developed a sort of confidence about his powers, and he stands up against Dr. Haber and voices his desires on how thinks he should use his powers. In chapter 9, it states, "I can't let you use my dreams anymore." Use them? Use them. In chapter 10, it also states, "You can't go with him, he's destroying you." "Nobody can destroy me," he said. So both of these quotes, we can see that Orr's personality and Orr's view in relationship with his power has clearly shifted. He's more confident and he's not a timid pushover anymore. He is assured in his abilities, and he is sure that he knows what he wants to do with his abilities and that he will be able to use his powers to stop Dr. Haber eventually. In the last quote that I stated, we can see that he is reassured in his ability to change reality, that he's not scared of it, but instead it finds it empowering. The next point that I want to explore is the changes in George's interpersonal relationships and how it affects his outlooks on life. In the beginning of the book, we see that his outlook is very bleak. He does not have any joys, passions, or hobbies. He's just simply moving throughout his day, worried about his powers and worried about sleeping because he is afraid that he's going to dream and change reality. He's living life all alone. He does not seem to have any friends or companions, and he also doesn't have any ambitions to move forward in his life, kind of stuck where he is. In chapter 2, it states, "How about interpersonal relationships in general? Do you feel you relate satisfactory to other people, that you have a niche in the emotional ecology of your environment?" I guess so. This line, we see that this is how George views himself, where he is living in a world full of people, but he doesn't really have any relationships with them, and that the few relationships that he does have, he doesn't feel satisfied in them. He just feels okay. In chapter 3, it also states George Orr stayed in Portland because he had always lived there, because he had no reason to believe that life anywhere else would be better or different. We can see from this line that George does not make any attempts to broaden his horizons because he truly believes that life anywhere in the world would not be good because of his powers. He is so focused on his sleep problems and the power of his dreams that he is not putting forth any effort to make relationships with other people. By the end of the book, we see that George's outlook on relationships with others is way more positive than in the beginning. He has started to find people that he cares about and that he's no longer second guessing that if he has relationships with other people. In chapter 10, it states, "Do you need anyone? I need somebody to love. I'll get by with a little help with my friends." In this quote, we see that there's a 180-degree turn in his thoughts on relationships with people in general. Before, he was kind of walking through life aimlessly, not really putting in any effort to have friends or have companions or have relationships in his life. But by the end of the book, through this quote, we see that he has realized that he does need people and that he wants people in his life. By the end of the book, we see that George is actively seeking people to have in his life, those that he cares about romantically and platonically, and those who he admits that can help him throughout his journey. The last point that I'm going to be talking about today is the changes in George's romantic relationships throughout the book. So in the beginning of the book, we learn a lot about George's personal life and about George's personality. We see, that he has isolated himself because of his fear of his dreams and sleeping in general. In chapter 2, it states, "How's your sex life? Had one trial marriage, broke up last summer after a couple of years. Did you pull out or she? Both of us. She didn't want a kid. It wasn't full marriage material. And since then, well, there's some girls in my office. I'm not a great stud, actually." So, in this quote, we see just how romantically stunted and isolated George is. He was married, but decided to leave the marriage due to seemingly discourse about having children, but we can take from context clues about himself that we've learned previous in the knowledge that in reality he hasn't been making much of an effort to have relationships with anybody, especially romantic relationships. And as a reader, we can infer that he kind of uses the not wanting to have children thing as kind of an excuse to push away people because he's just so preoccupied with the fact that his dreams change reality that he's not focused on anything else. By the end of the novel, we see that George has completely changed around his romantic life. He's found a partner that he loves very much and cherishes even through the traumatic events and changes of reality. His relationship with Heather, the lawyer, went through a lot, and they developed a friendship and then feelings throughout the midst of war, apocalypse, and the multiple reality changes that affected both him and her. In chapter 11, it states, "He had no idea what or how much she recalled, nor how to fit it in with his multiple memories. This was not his wife, but a fiercer woman, vivid and difficult. He would have preferred less of a mess himself, but it wasn't up to him, and at least it had her in it. He knew her. He knew the stranger." So this quote really shows just how much George values the romantic relationship that he has with Heather towards the end of the book. Now, in the beginning of the book, we see that he wasn't really putting any effort to have romantic relationships, but we can see through this quote in chapter 11, which is the end of the book, that he has actively found a partner that he's willing to love throughout multiple reality changes, throughout multiple traumatic events in his life, and he's just happy to have her, that he is willing to relearn her throughout this reality change. Even though he knows that his wife is different from previous realities that they've been in together, he still loves her and sees her as his person. He goes from somebody who was actively refusing relationships and isolating himself from that kind of relationship to actively seeking out his wife in every reality that they go to. In conclusion, the book delves into many aspects of George's change throughout his life and throughout the length of the book. He goes through a tremendous journey of self discovery where he learns confidence in his altering abilities. He discovers how he really does need people in his life and how he wants to have relationships outside of himself. He also discovers that life has more meaning when you share it with people that you care about. And actively has better thoughts about his life, the rest of his life, because of the people that he's created relationships with. Because of this, he starts to explore the romantic capabilities that he has, because before he was so preoccupied with his powers and being scared of them that he did not allow himself to get close to women. All in all, George goes through life altering changes that help him become a better person and live a happier life, even after he deals with his ability to change reality with every dream. Thank you.